There comes a moment in some people's lives when they don't explode. They don't break down. They don't even argue anymore. They just go quiet. Not the wounded silence that begs to be noticed. Not the cold silence meant to punish. A different kind of quiet. The kind that feels like a door has closed somewhere deep inside, and no one else has the key. If you've ever watched someone who used to care deeply suddenly become calm, distant, almost untouchable, you know how unsettling it is. It feels like you've lost access to them overnight. But here's the part most people get wrong. They didn't stop feeling. They stopped bleeding. And once you understand why that happens, you can never unsee it. Because this shift doesn't come from one bad day, one fight, or one betrayal. It's the result of years, sometimes decades, of invisible emotional labor that nobody thanked them for, and nobody even noticed. These are the people who walked into a room and instantly sensed tension no one else acknowledged. The ones who kept conversations from turning into arguments, who softened harsh words, who explained people to each other, who remembered everyone's wounds, triggers, and insecurities, and tiptoed around them, not because they were weak, because they were wired to care. From childhood, they were often praised for being mature, understanding, or so easy to talk to. Adults confided in them. Friends leaned on them. Family relied on them to keep the peace. What nobody realized was that this praise trained them to abandon themselves. Every time they swallowed their own hurt to protect someone else's feelings, they were rewarded. Every time they tolerated behavior that drained them, they were told they were kind. Over time, caring became less of a choice and more of a role they couldn't escape. They became the emotional shock absorbers of their world. When others panicked, they steadied. When others raged, they soothed. When others fell apart, they held everything together. But shock absorbers wear out, not suddenly, quietly. Because while they were busy understanding everyone else, no one was really trying to understand them. And here's something almost no one talks about. Highly sensitive people are not blind to manipulation, hypocrisy, or emotional games. They see it early. They just choose not to confront it. Because they want to believe in the best version of people. They hope patience will fix what honesty might destroy. So they stay. They forgive. They explain away red flags. They give second chances, then third, then 20th. Not because they don't know better, because they care too much to give up. But inside, something is recording everything. Every broken promise. Every time their needs were ignored. Every moment they felt used but stayed anyway. Not as conscious anger, but as pressure building behind the scenes. Eventually, one moment cracks the illusion. Not always the biggest betrayal, just the one that makes everything else suddenly make sense. The partner who swore loyalty but lied for years. The friend who mocked them behind their back. The family member they protected who never protected them. And the most painful realization isn't what happened. It's that deep down, they knew. They felt it. They sensed it. They ignored it. That's when the grief shifts. It stops being grief for the relationship and becomes grief for themselves, for the energy they gave, for the boundaries they never set, for the voice inside them they kept silencing. And something inside finally says, no more. Not dramatically, not loudly, just finally. This is the moment outsiders misunderstand the most, because they expect rage, tears, confrontation. Instead, they get calm, almost eerie calm. The person who used to react to everything suddenly stops reacting at all. The buttons that always worked don't work anymore. Guilt trips fall flat. Drama gets no response. Emotional chaos meets a steady wall. It's not cruelty. It's detachment. For the first time, they are no longer participating in dynamics that drain them. And this terrifies people who depended on that participation. Because when someone stops overfunctioning, everyone else is forced to face how much they relied on it. Arguments that used to be mediated now escalate. Problems that were quietly handled now remain unresolved. Emotional storms that were absorbed now hit full force. It's like removing the invisible scaffolding holding a building upright. Suddenly, everyone sees how unstable things really were. So people push back. You've changed. You're selfish now. What happened to you? You used to care. What they really mean is, you used to make things easier for me. But the person going through this shift isn't trying to hurt anyone. They're trying to survive. Because caring without limits eventually turns into self-destruction. At this stage, something powerful happens. They stop confusing compassion with responsibility. They can still feel others' pain, but they no longer believe they must fix it. They stop explaining themselves to people committed to misunderstanding them. They stop over-apologizing for having needs. They stop chasing people who only valued them when they were useful. And yes, their circle often shrinks. Not because they hate people, but because fewer people meet them where they now stand. The old connections were built on roles: fixer, listener, peacekeeper, rescuer. The new self doesn't play those roles automatically. So some relationships quietly dissolve. Others transform into something healthier. And occasionally new people appear, drawn not to endless availability but to grounded presence. Because here's the paradox. When someone stops leaking energy in all directions, they don't become empty. They become solid. Their kindness becomes deliberate instead of reflexive. Their attention becomes focused instead of scattered. Their presence feels calm rather than anxious. Some call this becoming cold. In reality, it's becoming selective. Think of it like turning a floodlight into a laser. Same energy, just no longer wasted everywhere. This shift shows up in everyday ways. They don't answer messages immediately out of obligation. They say no without inventing elaborate excuses. They leave conversations that feel draining. They stop volunteering for emotional labor no one asked them to do. At work, they do their job, but not everyone else's. In families, they show love, but not self-sacrifice. In friendships, they give support, but expect it in return. For people used to unlimited access, this feels like rejection. For the person finally protecting themselves, it feels like relief. And something else changes too. Something subtle but unmistakable. They become harder to manipulate. Not because they learned new tactics, but because they no longer need approval at any cost. Love bombing doesn't hook them the same way. Guilt tactics don't land as deeply. Emotional chaos doesn't pull them into rescue mode. They pause. They observe. They decide. It's not that they trust less. They trust differently. Trust is no longer given automatically. It's built through consistency. And perhaps the most surprising part of this transformation is this: they don't become vengeful. Despite everything they endured, most don't seek revenge or expose everyone who hurt them. They simply disengage. Because revenge still ties you emotionally to the past. Indifference sets you free. They understand that not every battle needs to be fought. Some just need to be left behind. This doesn't mean they never feel hurt again. They do. But pain no longer dismantles them. It informs them. Instead of asking, "How do I fix this person?" they ask, "Is this healthy for me?" That single question changes everything. Over time, they rebuild their life around a new foundation. Peace over approval. Clarity over fantasy. Reciprocity over one-sided devotion. Self-respect over self-sacrifice. Their home becomes a refuge, not a recovery room for everyone else's chaos. Their time becomes valuable, not endlessly available. Their energy becomes intentional, and something beautiful happens. They start to rediscover parts of themselves that were buried under years of caretaking. Interests, creativity, curiosity, joy. Not the dramatic highs of constant emotional intensity, but a quieter, steadier happiness. They learn that calm is not boring, it's freedom. Freedom from walking on eggshells. Freedom from overthinking every interaction. Freedom from being responsible for moods that aren't theirs. Some people will miss the old version of them, the endlessly giving one. But the people who truly care about them won't want them to go back. Because the healthiest love doesn't demand self-erasure. It celebrates wholeness. In fact, relationships built after this shift are often deeper, not shallower. Because they're no longer fueled by need or rescue, but by genuine choice. Two people choosing each other, not clinging out of imbalance. And that's the final misconception we need to clear up. This transformation is not about becoming untouchable. It's about becoming unreachable to what harms you. They didn't stop loving. They stopped loving in ways that destroy them. They didn't stop caring. They stopped caring about things that cost them their peace. They didn't become hard. They became whole. So if you recognize yourself in this story, if you feel like something inside you has gone quiet lately, don't panic. You may not be losing your heart. You may be finally protecting it. Growth doesn't always look like blooming. Sometimes it looks like pruning, cutting away what drains life so what remains can thrive. And yes, it can feel lonely at first. Change always rearranges your world before it stabilizes it. But on the other side of that quiet is something incredibly powerful. A life that no longer depends on constant approval, constant fixing, or constant exhaustion. A life where caring is a gift you give, not a resource others take without limit. And once you experience that kind of freedom, you don't want to go back. Not because you hate the past, because you finally understand your worth in the present. So if someone tells you you've changed, they're probably right. You changed from surviving to living, from absorbing everything to choosing what you carry, from being everyone's safe place to becoming your own. And that isn't the end of your empathy. It's the moment it becomes yours.